Canadian economic immigration system is broken. Broken meaning it's not functioning as it should. How should it function? In pursuit of economic prosperity as measured by GDP per capita and not simply by GDP.
I don't think it's helpful to think of the Canadian immigration system as singularly perfect or broken. It's neither of those things. It's somewhere in the complex middle. Something that works quite well is the Express Entry Federal Skilled Worker Program. That is, generally speaking, bringing in exactly the kinds of people it should be bringing in.
More than 50% of STEM graduated immigrants are not working in STEM. More than 60% of healthcare educated immigrants are not working in healthcare. So how are we arguing that this system works?
We certainly don't want an immigration program that simply bulks up the population and brings more people and just grows the aggregate economy of Canada. We want to be much more selective than that.
What's an entrepreneur? It's a buzzword.
I just offered you a definition. Criticize my definition. Is good intention doing business in a continuum. Entrepreneur is someone who fails fast. Entrepreneur is someone who doesn't retire after one failure. How do you think US is the US? On the back of simple workers or on the back of entrepreneurs? That's our argument.
People don't come to Canada to invest their money. It's a very attractive place to live, but it's not necessarily a very attractive place to have passive investment.
You attract, by tying PR status to the investment dollar, you attract passive, low return investments that just drive up prices of capital in Canada and crowd out other investments.
Low return is an assumption, and not controlling where the investment goes is another assumption that you are basing your criticism on.
There is no need for any immigration lawyers or consultants. That whole industry gets shut down overnight. Those jobs are gone. And that labor gets reallocated, all those smart immigration lawyers, they get reallocated to doing really productive things in the economy. Like creating real value. That's the model I have in mind.
I'm a fan of criticism, but then again, your assumptions are all fundamentally flawed with all due respect, but it's okay. You're an economist, and I appreciate this. You tend to see people as numbers. I tend to see them as humans. Hello and welcome to another Catalyst Canada Roundtable. Today, we're honored to be joined by two leading scholars in immigration policy, Professor Dan Hiebert and Professor Mikal Skuterud. Dan is Professor Emeritus at UBC, a former academic in residence at IRCC, a member of the Advisory Council to the Deputy Minister of Immigration, and a regular policy advisor at various levels of government. He's also a dedicated community builder who has spent his career studying and shaping Canadian immigration policy. Mikal is a professor of economics at the University of Waterloo, director of the Canadian Labour Economics Forum, Roger Phillips Scholar of Social Policy, and fellow in residence at the C.D. Howe Institute. Widely recognized as a go-to voice on the economics of immigration, he has spent over 20 years of his career studying the economics of immigration policy. A full introduction would take far longer than we have today, so we encourage you to visit our website where you'll find links to our guests' social media channels. Be sure to follow them, to learn, and to engage with their thought leadership. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us and for your continued contributions to this critical national conversations. To begin, I would like to put forward a proposition for discussion. Canadian economic immigration system is broken. Broken meaning it's not functioning as it should. How should it function? In pursuit of economic prosperity as measured by GDP per capita, and not simply by GDP. In fact, not only is the current system failing to serve that objective, it's arguably working against it. This is happening through misguided selection of economic immigrants, disastrous administration, and neglected integration. Therefore, reform isn't just necessary, it's urgently overdue. As we consider reform, the whole purpose of having these roundtables, we must be strategic. And that starts from prioritizing the attraction and retention of high potential investors and entrepreneurs, what we understand as business immigration. This stream holds transformative potential for Canada's long-term economic prosperity, and it deserves a central place in our policy agenda. So let's start with the economist in the House. Mikal, what do you think about this proposition?
Wow. Yeah, that's there was a lot there. For sure there was a lot there. It started out mostly in me in agreement, although not everybody would agree. You know, when we talk about economic immigration, what is the economic objective? You know, you focused on one there, GDP per capita. That certainly isn't, and we've written up and co-authored a paper where we make the case that that's the most reasonable measurable outcome, but I'm not quite sure not everybody agrees with that, so that there is a discussion there. Now then you moved on to business immigration. As I understand it, business immigration is a subset of economic immigration. And so as soon as we have set a target for new permanent residents within the economic class and increasing business admissions, business class admissions, necessarily means admitting fewer people in some other group. And so what is the trade-off there? My reading of the Canadian evidence is that Canada has always struggled with the business class immigration. And that's not really controversial, at least within the academic community. The evidence is pretty clear that the selection there's been what we might call some adverse selection, that it's not, you don't kind of get the intended type of applicants that you're trying to target. I mean, I think that the hope on business immigration is to address an objective of business investment, which is a huge problem in Canada. Lackluster business investment is a big problem in Canada. Trying to leverage immigration to address that on the surface has a lot of appeal, no question, but doing it in practice is something entirely different. And my understanding is that we could get into the details of why, but for sure there's quite compelling evidence.
Okay, perfect. So let's take it to Dan. First of all, let's dance with the proposition that, hey, it's GDP per capita as opposed to GDP. Let's discuss that first, and then we can get into the trade-off, and then we can get into the how. So Dan, what do you think? Do you think economic immigration should serve GDP or should serve something more? Is it, if it's something more, is it GDP per capita, or what do you think?
Well, let me start by just reacting to your proposition in general, and then I'll get to your specific. I don't think it's helpful to think of the Canadian immigration system as singularly perfect or broken. It's neither of those things. It's somewhere in the complex middle. But there's parts of it that work really well and parts of it that don't work well at all. Just as an example, something that works quite well is the Express Entry Federal Skilled Worker Program. That is, generally speaking, bringing in exactly the kinds of people it should be bringing in. I mean, nothing's perfect, but it's doing a pretty good job of that. There are other parts of it which I would agree are misaligned with what Canada's needs might be and so forth. So, but to just declare that the system is broken, I think is just way too strong a statement. So I just wanted to react to the proposition, first of all, that way. Second, I just want to spend a second on the GDP per capita thing, because Mikal is really the expert on this. I'm a more of a spectator on that issue than I am someone who's like directly analyzing it. But sure, yeah, we certainly don't want an immigration program that simply bulks up the population and brings more people and just grows the aggregate economy of Canada. We want to be much more selective than that. I'll just leave that as a statement to say something about the business immigration program, or the idea of a business immigration program. First of all, Canada, as Mikal said, desperately needs investment capital, but it also needs entrepreneurship. It needs innovation, and it needs a more global outlook in terms of its trading relationships. We're seeing that in spades right now with the kinds of reactions Canadians are having to the threat, and in some cases the reality of American tariffs. And it turns out that immigrants in general do contribute to those things, right? So immigrants tend to be, if you compare the Canadian-born population and the whole of the immigrant population, and I'm not talking about business class immigrants, I'm talking about all immigrants now, they tend to be a little more entrepreneurial than the Canadian-born population. Secondly, they tend also to be a little more innovative. If you look at patents per capita in the immigrant population and the Canadian-born population, a little bit higher on the immigration side. Thirdly, they do tend to be a little bit more globally focused because when immigrants start businesses, typically they connect their country of origin. Very few of our immigrants come from the United States. So if they're connecting with their country of origin, that is going to be, by definition, more global than the Canadian economy is more generally. So immigrants do great things on the entrepreneurship side. But now the question becomes, and Mikal put his finger on a very important point, is it possible to select immigrants to do even more of that by selecting business class immigrants? And that's an open question, which I presume we're going to talk about in the next half hour or so. But that's the big question, right? Can we actually have a system that selects to do even better on the entrepreneurship side, on the innovation side, and on the global connection side?
Okay, Mikal, can you play your own devil's advocate here? Because like I'm totally in fan. GDP per capita should be the objective. You wrote about it, and Dan is deferring to you. What's the best argument against picking GDP per capita as something that we should really be after when in IRPA we say economic prosperity is something that we designed the whole immigration system for?
Well, I think the criticism I get most often is that GDP per capita is not a complete measure of everything we care about in a population. It's an incomplete measure of the well-being of people in a population. And so there certainly, I mean, this is a general criticism of using GDP as a measure of national well-being. There's a movement to try and construct better alternative measures. This movement is called Beyond GDP. So there's really great work. There's no question that there's.
But do you think that's applicable to economic immigration? Like I understand we have a country, Bhutan, their measure is happiness. They're measuring happiness instead of GDP for their well-being. Like I
Right.
understand development doesn't necessarily mean GDP, but we're under the umbrella of economic immigration. And if the choice is GDP or GDP per capita, is GDP per capita at least the most practical and the most understandable objective? Because I understand if you want to go out, sure, why are we measuring GDP, right? But
Uh-huh.
under the economic framework,
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if you want me to continue to play the devil or not, but it's
why
hard.
not? Because that's the only way. They say you got to doubt it as much as you can before
Yeah,
you
yeah,
reach certainty, right? I mean, like if we
yeah.
can
No,
doubt it, let's doubt it.
yeah. So there's no question. I think the concern is that I mean, you could have, in theory, increase immigration or target immigrants in a way that boosts some other metric that doesn't do much to raise GDP per capita, but it's something that we care about. And so people say, you shouldn't just focus on a single objective, but like GDP per capita. The part of it that I struggled with the most is when people say, well, what about this and what about this and what about this? Nation building, geopolitical power. I mean, that in today's, when we're seeing these trade wars, that kind of geopolitical force is something that now is, has a lot of credibility to it. What about just having a bigger population that you're more powerful as a nation? So these are all different economic objectives. The problem is this classic principle in economics called the Tinbergen rule that I talk about all the time. But the problem is you have one policy you're thinking about here, economic policy, and there's a limited number of levers you can pull here. You can change the level and you can change the composition, but change the composition, like do you focus on skilled or current labor market needs? There's not a lot you can do on the policy. And the problem you have is if you have all these different objectives and they're not particularly well aligned, then you potentially pull on a policy that improves one but makes the other one worse off. And that leads to a lot of bad policy. And some of these outcomes that people push for, like right now, there's no question the economic objective continues to be about meeting current labor market needs. Those current labor market needs are very much about sort of what I call yesterday's economy, jobs of the past. They tend to be lower skilled kinds of jobs. So one of the groups, for example, that's being prioritized now in economic class immigration in Canada are cooks. Cooks. That is an economic objective. I think there's a lot of people that have a view that there are certain labor market needs out there, and that's what we should be prioritizing. That doesn't align well with leveraging immigration to raise GDP per capita. You know,
Okay.
those
So
are
let's
all lines. So there are other objectives, and that really gets at the rub of all of these issues. Is you got to tie your hands. You got to commit to something. You can't do everything. So
sure.
better to pick something and do it well. And if you do that well, what I always say is that we could do a whole lot more humanitarian immigration, which is what I really care about.
Okay, so for now, let's focus. Okay, it's not about the cake. It's about how big a slice each of us gets. Okay, so far so good. Now let's move to what Dan said. Dan said the federal express entry skilled worker is a system that is working well. And I want to counter argue that, right? If the federal skill express entry is working well, supposedly it's supposed to bring in people to fill labor gaps. But study after study shows, like, let's take STEM. More than 50% of STEM graduated immigrants are not working in STEM. More than 60% of healthcare educated immigrants are not working in healthcare. So how are we arguing that this system works? I'm going to give you another obvious example. This system gives the same exact amount of points to a bachelor degree from University of Toronto or University of Waterloo than it gives to a college degree from a diploma mill. So, I ruined my life 4 years getting that degree, coming out and I realized, hey, I got the same points in the eyes of this system as someone who practically bought their degree. So or age. I heard you, Dan, in another seminar quite clearly saying that immigration is not serving our demographic need in terms of bringing down Canadian average age. We're at 41. If we want to reduce that by 1 year, you said we need 4 million immigrants. So yet the express entry is maximizing points for age. So I'll just put it back to you. How do you argue that this system is working well?
Do you want me to start, or Mikal?
No, sure, you, because you're the one who said you think the express entry system is working well. So let's go with you.
Yeah. So remember, there's a whole bundle of things that happen in express entry. And when I made that statement, I was speaking specifically about the federal skilled worker portion of express entry. I'm not so enthusiastic about some other parts of express entry. Mikal and I have had other conversations on some of the category-based selection. And some of those I think are questionable as to whether they're working or not. In fact, we don't have enough data to really be able to prove that point, which is a bit of a problem. But what we do have is we have very good data on the federal skilled worker program. We have that data over a long period of time. We have that data even before express entry was created as a system, and we have it, since that time. The data always have about a 2 or 3 year time lag because the data are based on records that people submit. If memory serves, I think we're up to like 2022 or something like that in the data that we can look at. And we can see very clearly how well people are doing in terms of their labor market earnings, self-employment earnings, in terms of whether they are taking social assistance and all those kinds of things. And what those studies show is that the folks who are specifically selected in the federal skilled worker program, first of all, get jobs quickly. Secondly, they don't start at a fantastic earnings in their first year, but their earnings trajectory is very significant. Over a 2 or 3 year period, especially, they meet and exceed Canadian earnings averages. So if you're looking at something that grows the per capita GDP, very quickly, they come to a point where they are earning more than the average Canadian, therefore paying more taxes than the average Canadian, and therefore helping to grow that GDP per capita figure. So that's the general picture. Now, could it be better? Could it have a younger cohort of people that are coming in? That'd be nice. Could it be even better calibrated in things like the STEM graduates, as you point out quite correctly? We're not seeing anything close to a full follow through of folks who come in with a STEM degree and getting us employment based on a STEM degree. So there's certainly things that could be better, but it's not broken in the sense that it's having bad outcomes. It's just not having perfect, the 100% ideal outcomes.
Sure. Because, I'm representing an association of 550 working immigration lawyers. So we are really the ones, dealing on a daily basis with the psychological burden that this system has, right? Like the other day, I had literally one U of T graduate who said, I spent $350,000 on earning my degree, and I'm every day, I cannot sleep. This is a 23-year-old lady, right? Like she's telling me, like, after $300,000 and after all that hard work, I can't get permanent residency. maybe that strength of the sentence, sure, it's not broken, but it can be a lot better. And we are here to make it better. We're not here to say it's broken. Let's forget that. Let's just completely focus on how we can make this system the best it really can be. And let's go to GDP per capita and how's that reflected? Because express entry is really important when we move it to business immigration, right? Like if human capital, Mikal wrote in his papers, they're saying for GDP per capita, there are a couple of things that are important. Capital, innovation, high skills, and based on my understanding of reading your paper, all of these things come perfectly together in entrepreneurship, in economic activity, right? So this is what we are looking at. Now, express entry is not focusing on capital, is not focusing on entrepreneurship, but human capital. So under human capital, one obvious point is quality of education. Like this is something that's it's a simple fix under the express entry system. Like we can just add in features in the system that gets points based on quality of education or quality of work. Do you think this is a good fix for the express entry system?
So, I want to emphasize what Dan said about the system not being broken. It's not broken by any means. Broken implies, you got to rebuild something. You don't. The crux of what's there is the express entry system with a CRS. It's literally, a flick of a switch to go back to just singularly being focused on that and then improving it. And that's totally doable. It's about political will, and it's about saying no to special interests that are lobbying and saying, okay, we're going to tie our hands. We're going to let the system not be politicized and just focus on this. You talked about entrepreneurship. Ultimately, you need something that's measurable. You can't talk about objectives that you can't measure because then it just all is hot air and pie in the sky. So you need something that's measurable. How do you measure entrepreneurship, quality of entrepreneurship? How do you measure quality of a school or quality of a degree? I mean, these things are hard. There's no question. The most reasonable thing that, in my mind at least, there's no question, the most reasonable, measurable are people's labor market earnings, candidates' labor market earnings. And the beautiful thing about it is in Canada, we've invested a lot of money on some incredible database. In fact, Dan's been part of the teams like at IRCC working on this stuff and seen it go through all the years. I'd say in the world, there isn't a country in the world that has better data on the earnings of newcomers than we do. We've got a database called the SEED, where we have links of all the immigration records with all the characteristics of the application, all the temporary work permits and where people work, linked up with all their T1 income tax returns and all the corporate information. Like we've linked the corporate tax records to the individual tax records. So we know where they work. We know what are the profits of these companies that they work for. And this is the universe of it's not a sample of people. It's everybody in Canada. These are incredible databases.
Know who their employees are.
You know who their employees are. Like we know who the Canadians where they're working with. Let's leverage that. We're in them, and we talk about big data and all this technology that we know how to use data. Let's do it. We got smart minds. Let's leverage that data to do this system well. And so, how do you do that? Well, the part that often gets missed is at least when that express entry, and also what Dan said. It's absolutely right. There's no question that system works if the objective is increasing the earnings of the people who are selected. If you prioritize people through this express entry, I've been working with some LFS data that's a bit more timely than the tax data. It's very clear in those results. We're seeing it from 2015 up to the pandemic. Earnings outcomes were improving a lot of newcomers. There's not a lot of data in Canada that shows improvements over time in the earnings of newcomers. It's very clear in the data. So the system was working. Okay, so then the part that gets missed is the point system within Express Entry. It's called the Comprehensive Ranking System, the CRS. When that was created, the intention was that those points would be a measure of people's expected future lifetime earnings in Canada. That's the way we should think about the CRS. We're prioritizing the applicants whose expected or predicted future lifetime earnings in Canada are the highest. How do you do that? Well, we have all this data from the past on past applicants. We see what their characteristics are when they apply, and then we see what their earnings were in Canada. What characteristics best predict future earnings? We can build those models.
You reached that conclusion. You reached that conclusion, and you're saying the best predictor is future earnings. You're saying let's rebuild this system based on expected earnings 10 years after arrival. This is what you're concluding. But let's go back to Dan. Express Entry is not doing that. But we can easily do that. Well, no, it's indirectly doing. But Mikal, it's indirectly doing that. It's indirectly doing
it.
Okay, no. How is okay? Educate me.
You're building a regression model where it's an equation, a mathematical equation. On the right-hand side of the equations are people's characteristics, and they are predicting future earnings. That's what appears on the left-hand side of the equation. And then the coefficients give you the weights. How much should language matter? How much does a 1-point increase in your language score translate into an improvement in earnings? How much does work experience translate into a work? How much is education? The problem is that model is very crude. Right now, the R squared in that model, the one we've been using, is about 0.13. So in other words, the characteristics we're using explain about 13% of all the variation in immigrants' future earnings. 8%. That's not very good. So we can do a way better we can way better if we use information like, what are their current earnings? What school did they go to? What field of study are they in?
Because I want to unpack this. The equation. Let's talk about the equation. The equation is age, education. What else is there? It's age, education, work experience, and language. Right? This is the equation with different. I'm assuming that if age has the highest score because it had a higher coefficient in the equation that I never got to see and to analyze, right? But I'm saying
public. You can read the equation. You can read the research paper.
Your assessment. Okay, so your assessment of this equation that it's working as intended, so it's bringing the sharpest and the brightest. So in other words, the combination that we currently have manifested in the CRS system, giving different weight to age, education, language, and work experience is the best we can do to predict future earnings. Okay, so
I said the R squared is 0.13. We can do a lot better than 0.13.
Okay, what's the idea?
So what you need to use is more information on the right-hand side. So there's a limited number of X's determining the Y. You just listed what those X's are. But we can add a lot more so that the prediction becomes better. We can even change the functional form of how these X's translate. So the age thing you're talking about, when it was first estimated, might be a linear function. So that age is, the reality of ages is a very non-linear function. Being 15 is very different than being 25, but admitting an immigrant who's 50 or 60, their lifetime earnings are very low because they've only got 5 or 6 years left to live. So we could do things that are a lot more sophisticated than what we've been doing. In principle, the system works well, but it can be improved. And the things that I think you could do the best with is field of study. Like you said, right now, every field of study is treated the same. We don't use any information on the applicant's field of study. We don't use any information on their school that they went to. Every bachelor's degree is treated the same. We could do way better than that. We don't use information on what current earnings are, but we could do that. The best predictor of future earnings are current earnings. A postgraduate, international students who gets a postgraduate work permit, they get a job. Imagine you got 2 international students, they graduate, they get a job. One is earning $100,000 a year and the other one's earning $40,000 a year. But they both have a degree. Well, they get the same points then in the CRS. Well, that's silly. Clearly, we should be prioritizing the one that's earning $100,000. But we don't do that now. So we can improve the system a lot.
Do you agree?
Yeah, more X's is good. Well, okay, couple of qualifications. The point Mikal has just made on current earnings as a predictor of future earnings, totally agree with that. The only sticky point about that is we have great data for those who are already in Canada, but it's very difficult to compare earnings from people from 150 or 200 different countries who are applying from outside Canada. So that would be a really hard policy to implement. How do you compare an engineer's earnings in India versus an engineer's earnings in Nigeria versus in Germany. That would be a real tough thing to do. But for those that are in Canada, that would be great. That would be a really strong predictor. I would also make a second qualification point, which is one has to be careful with how many X's are in the equation, right? Like making it super complicated really does make the application system really onerous. And also, I don't know, like you really have to start wondering about, can you really get that precise in the way you do things? But generally speaking, I'm very much in agreement with what Mikal is speaking about. Those are minor qualifications to an overall agreement on the main point. But could I just get us to the topic I thought we were going to talk about, which is, should we create something that really selects for entrepreneurial skill rather than general skill? And I think that we should have a discussion about that. I don't think there's a clear and easy answer to that. And I'd make a few starting points to think about. One is, and we haven't really touched on this yet, so I think it's worth saying, when you create programs like a new business class immigration program, that's a huge amount of administrative energy that has to be poured into that process. It doesn't just happen at the snap of a finger. First of all, you have to get people around the table talking about what it should do, what its objectives are, how it should go about executing those objectives. Then you have to create an actual operation system. You have to have manuals. You have to program the system to make it work. And finally, you can make it happen. It's a very expensive process to create a boutique kind of program. And so you have to ask, is the expected outcome going to be so good that it justifies all that cost? And then Mikal also raised another very important point, which is the displacement effect. So now if we think about selecting immigrants for their entrepreneurial potential, maybe we're forgetting about selecting them for some of their other human capital characteristics. And so then the ones we bring in for their entrepreneurial potential are going to displace others. A really good example of that is the bonus points that are given to people who have received their education in Canada, post-secondary education in Canada, right? You get, I forgot the number now. Is it 25 for a
15.
bachelor degree and 15 for a diploma from a college? I can't remember, but there's a certain number of points assigned to that. And there's a real displacement impact from that. Basically, what's happening is, in prioritizing those individuals who've got their education in Canada, we've displaced people with higher levels of official language competency that are coming from outside Canada. And so that has an impact in terms of future earnings. So you just have to think through whether the displacement effect and the cost of administering the program is going to be worth the outcomes you're going to achieve.
Okay,
I'll
let's
throw that
begin
out
with the
as a
outcomes.
point of discussion, and we
Sure,
can go further if
100%.
we want to.
Let's go with the outcomes. What does success looks like under business immigration? With the caveat, business immigration, we have two streams. That's how we think about it. Passive investment, we can talk about that separately. Active entrepreneurship. Active entrepreneurship, we have a program right now, Start a Visa program. I can get into the details, tell you a brief overview of how it works, and then we can brainstorm how we can make it better. Passive investment, we used to have one, we no longer have it. So the distinction really here is the expectation that we have on the prospective immigrant. One is passive, show me the money, put in the money somewhere. You're good, you get residency. The other, no, you got to show me the sweat, right?
Yep.
Okay, so expected outcome.
Just a qualification on that. Remember, we also have provincial nominee programs, and there's a whole bundle of provincial nominee programs,
but we don't really
including
take them.
passive
We don't
investment one
really
in
take
Quebec and so forth.
sure, but we don't really take them seriously. Like for example, for active entrepreneurship, no, seriously. Like Ontario closed down its entrepreneurship program back in 2023 because what? Because they only had 2 nominations. Because it's just simply bad design, right? It's lack of cooperation and communication between different levels of government. When we are a signatory to this UN treaty that says immigration is a whole of a government and whole of a society approach. That's another discussion. Let's go back to expected outcome. I've got a thought experiment. 100-something thousand international students. There is this Global Affairs Canada report that says this 800,000 contributed something 30 billion to the Canadian economy.
Or at least much more probably.
Well, they're kind of like, actually, they're saying that we could have been more conservative in our assessment, and they were not. But let's say 800,000, 30 billion, and now we come, let's say we do 20,000 at $2 million passive investment. So the expected outcome is getting that $2 million, and this is what we learned from our previous roundtables. The $2 million should not be a guaranteed investment like we used to do it in Canada before. It should be at risk. And we're arguing for a program that gives discretion to the prospective immigrant that they get to choose where they would invest that money at risk for at least a certain number of years, let's say 5 years. So you put $2 million, 5 years, you do your own due diligence, and then the government designates some entities that can take and pool that immigrant money, like the EB-5 system in the US. So the expected outcome really here is investment money as measured by investments placed in places that we directed. What do you think about this proposition?
There's no barriers on foreign direct investment into Canada. If somebody has money to invest in Canada, I don't know why they need PR status in Canada. I don't understand the investor program. I mean, the real risk here is, of course, the same risk and rabbit hole we fell down with the international student program and to some extent temporary foreign worker programs. The reality is that the way an economist thinks about this is that the value of Canadian permanent residency around the world is very high. The willingness to pay for Canadian PR status around the world is very high. Imagine if the government ran an auction. Rather than doing everything we do, let's just auction off PR spots to the highest bidders around the world. We could do that. Can you imagine the revenue we could generate doing that? Just selling PR stats. Well, to me, an investor program is the same thing. You're just potentially just selling PR stats. That's not how we do it in this country. There's all kinds of ethical reasons why you don't want to do that.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because that has been coming on. And in fact, we have another guest who's, we have a lot of more guests in future roundtables that we're discussing on that normative issue. Is there anything wrong with selling residency to investors?
Yes.
But what do we do? But okay, but how is that different from what we're doing with the skilled workers? Like immigration, Mikal, by nature is discrimination. Let's not forget that. We're sitting on our high chairs and we're selecting people based on how they can contribute to the money, to the economy. So if I'm going to the skilled immigrant and I'm saying, show me your skills, jump through all these fire hoops, and that's okay. And all of a sudden I'm saying, oh, just because you have money and you want to put your money here, now there's something wrong with that? How do you distinguish between the two?
Well, I guess the problem I don't understand is there's nothing you don't need PR status to invest money in Canada.
Well, if you're Iranian, look at the source countries. You got to look at the source countries. Of course, here's the thing. If I'm an American, and this is where immigration gets even more discriminatory, right? At the end of the day, citizenship is a privilege that we have, right? The lines, we call them borders, are like arbitrary. Somebody happens to be American, they have access, they have privilege. But if I happen to be Iranian, no, I don't have access. I cannot do FDI in Canada because I need a visa to come and see where my investment went. If I'm Indian, if I'm Chinese, if I'm Vietnamese, and look at Canada's source countries. We don't get our immigrants from the US or Germany or the look, let's get the white people in. No, it's not that. The reality is whoever is in the market for Canada are people who have access problems. So that's why an immigrant who has, okay, go ahead.
I don't see that. So what you need in Canada to attract investment is you need human capital. I mean, you need, without any human capital, there's no incentive to invest in any physical capital. Your Iranian story, I don't understand why in today's world there are these kinds of capital market frictions that somebody can't invest in Canada because they can't get a visitor's visa to come and check out
that's the reality.
I'm sure there are anecdotal stories about that. I don't think that's the barrier to capital investment in Canada, that people can't get.
Well, it really depends. Let's break it down, because this is
I don't think that's a very important phenomenon.
But that is very, very important. That is very, very important. For many of the nationalities, which happen to be from the top source countries to Canada, you need a visitor visa to come. Well, it depends on how you look at investment, right? If I have $2 billion and I want to risk $5 million in a Canadian company, I don't even need to be there. But if my entire net worth is $10 million and I really want to do something with $2 million of it, that's 20% of my entire net worth.
Right.
I want to go to Canada,
right,
and I want to meet with the people that I'm giving the money to.
Right.
For that, I need a visa, right?
Yeah,
so how do you...
the point is your earnings, your income. If you're such a successful entrepreneur and you have this capital and a great business idea, your earnings are going to be very high when you come to Canada, your self-employment earnings.
No, we're talking passive investors, Mikal. No. We were talking passive investors. Now you're talking entrepreneurs. Dan, what do you think about this? Do you think it's not good to target passive investors? Because we can talk about entrepreneurs later. That's a different story. I think that's a more depressing story of how we're doing things right now. But Dan, what do you think about passive investors? All I need you to do is RBI, residency by investment. Let me give you an RBI product for Canada. What do you think is wrong with that?
I like to look at what we know, and we've had two goes at that particular issue before in Canada, at least two different trials, a big one and a small one. The big one we tried was the investor program that was put in place. What was it? Was it 1986 or 1988? My dates get a little bit fuzzy, but it was in the mid to late 1980s. And Canada admitted lots of people through that program. And what we found is it wasn't meeting the objectives of the program, which was to really get people to invest in Canada. What was happening instead is people were fulfilling the requirements of the application process. They were coming to Canada, and then frequently it was astronaut families, right? Where most of the family members would live in Canada, but the person who actually had the money would be going back to their country of origin and making their investment work there instead of in Canada, etc. It just wasn't meeting its objectives. I could go on and on and on about what that looked like. But the main thing I'll say is if you look at the earnings from investment, declared earnings from investment in the tax returns of the many thousands of people who came through that program, super low. It just wasn't achieving its objectives. So then in 2015, Canada started the pilot program, right? The Investor Venture Capital Program. And it had way higher requirements for that program. And we got, what was it, 7 people or something like that? I forgot the exact number, but like people don't come to Canada to invest their money. Like there's a lot of other places on earth that will give you higher investments than you're going to get in the Canadian economy. So it's just not the most attractive place on earth for that. It's a very attractive place to live, but it's not necessarily a very attractive place to have passive investments. So
Okay.
we've had two goes at it. Neither of them work.
Can
Dan,
we?
you know something about this. Is real estate a passive investment?
That certainly was a lot of
Kind
the
of
money
real
that was
estate.
brought.
Well,
That's where it went.
what kind of real estate? Am I investing it in a REIT?
It's real estate.
Am I buying a? Okay, we get to real estate, but I want to go back to Dan because you brought up a very good point. Criticism of the old business immigration program, right? I stand to argue that the biggest criticism at that time, what was Professor David Lay wrote, and we're going to have David Lay come here to talk about the findings of his report. First of all, in that report, he says, and basically what you're saying, he said over 50% of households declared income below the poverty levels in 1996. Well, he doesn't distinguish which cohort he looked at. Because if we have a passive, let's go back to the Tinbergen rule that Mikal just told us about. If we're bringing in passive investment, the focus should be on that investment only. So is it wise to expect from a passive investor to show me employment income?
No.
Because that was the criticism. No, it's not investment income. The paper is clear. Like I have it here. We've studied this. We've been doing this for the past 11 months. So this paper, it goes to employment income and it says employment income is lower than the Canadian average. Therefore, this is the basis to declare that this program didn't work. So my challenge to you is, if I'm bringing a prospective immigrant solely because of the passive investment that they're bringing, is it fair and is it wise to measure them against employment income?
Measure them.
What form of the returns to this? You got to tell me more of what you have in mind when you're talking about this passive investment and what form the returns are taking.
Okay, you are a VC, Dan is a builder, and I want to create a hospital. We get designations from the government and we start attracting investment from immigration. What is wrong with that?
On earth, there are no barriers that are of any magnitude of significance to
Okay,
that kind
so
of
here's what we have.
you want to sell PR status to bring in that kind of investment.
Okay,
It
Mikal,
creates
there
all
is
kind of adverse selection.
I completely understand your point. Your point is this. Your point is like, okay, why do I need to be a resident to invest, right? If Mikal's VC is such an attractive VC, I don't need to be a Canadian, right? I'll just wire the money. Sure. Let me take you to another different world, which is the RBI market in the world. There are 80 countries offering residency by investment program. At least in our estimate, it's $100 billion market. The whole essence of that market is leveraging immigration to bringing investment. You are thinking as an investment first person with no access restriction. If I have UK citizenship and I'm an investment first person, I will never bring my money to Canada. It's obvious. We all know that, right? Why would I bring it to Canada? Money is being made somewhere else. We are here arguing there are people who are after living in our country, bringing their wives and children, let them be astronauts. If we can create them a context that they come here and make their money here, for sure. But no, bring your money, bring your children, bring your roots here. And because you're primarily thinking about immigration, then let that primary thinking bring in your investment. Why are we saying no to this market?
Because you get bad investments.
How is that a bad investment?
You want to chase the biggest return around the world.
No. But how's that a bad investment? Tell me, how's that a bad investment?
Well, Dana's just told us what happens. You get a lot of corner stores. You get a lot of real estate investment.
But we're talking about
returns of this investment are not good. No, this is not positive selection. If these are real winners, if these are people that know how to invest their money well, then tell me, how do you capture that success? How are the returns being materialized? I mean, you can look at people's corporate, or if these are incorporated businesses, then
no. We're not after. Okay, I understand. Maybe the confusion is here. You are saying your metrics for the success is the return on their investment. You're saying let's measure them by the return that they get on their investment.
What else are you going to do?
Just the fact that they're investing.
No,
I'm saying
that doesn't tell you anything. Look, so that's a bit of a problem. That I hear you throwing around these numbers, and the international education folks, the colleges in particular, throw around the same kinds of numbers. What they do to measure the benefit to the Canadian economy of these immigrants is they just add up one side of the budget. They add in just the tuition revenue. We found that was a huge mistake to think like that. There's a cost. When people come and live in a country, there's a cost as well. Right?
What's the cost of an investor? What's the cost of an investor? An international student comes here, shares a basement with 15 other students, works in the gig economy, pursuing a college degree that doesn't do anything for them, and they started, Mikal, this is headline news, and they end up in body bags going back to India. What's the cost of an investor coming to Canada? They're paying the application fee. The application fee historically have been much more expensive than the application fee that a regular skilled worker pays. And they're coming with money.
Seriously,
okay.
Well, what's the cost? I mean, we've just seen that when there are more pressures on the entire system, right? All the capital, now there's more on it. I mean, investors, if they live here, are going to use the school systems. They're going to use public transport. They're going to use all of this, right? The healthcare system. So there are costs. You can't just add what their investment is going to be. But the point is, too, that there's a trade-off here. You're not going to, I don't know how you measure the success of this. You've got to tell me that. But there is a fundamental problem how you measure the success. You can't just look at what people are bringing in. And there's a trade-off. Every time you admit one of these investors, you're shutting the door on somebody else. It's a zero-sum game. And so who are you shutting the door on? Maybe
I'm saying, let's go to Dan, and here's a proposition. Or here's our proposal. Permanent residency by express entry by 50,000 and give that 50,000 to business immigration.
That's outrageous. Like,
let's say, okay, let's talk about why.
Idea.
Okay, why?
Well,
let's break it down. Let's break it down. Let's break it down.
How are you going to prioritize those 50,000 business applicants?
We can talk about that, but let's talk about success. Let's talk about, I'm sorry that our immigration system, economic immigration system, is looking at people as economic units of output. That's the reality of the system. Okay? So I'm not making a judgment call between is an international student better than an investment or not. I'm just doing what the system has historically been doing. Reduce people to economic units. Now, skilled worker.
I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
Well, that means I don't care about your psychology. I don't care about your well-being. I don't care about
what kind of rule. Like, you want to pick the prettiest people or the people that are happiest now?
Sure. No, I'm not. I'm just stating the obvious.
We're going to give
I'm
people
just
a happiness test now, and you want to pick them?
no. I'm just arguing. Let's compare apples to apples, right? So if economic output, and as you said, the economic output, let's create a very easy equation, right? What's the cost? What's the benefit? And then I have an output. And let's compare the output of a skilled worker selected through the current express entry system, and let's compare it to a prospective business immigrant selected through the program that we are offering.
But
And let's compare the two.
why the current CRS? If you're proposing a new,
So that's a different thing. We can talk about that. We can
let's
talk about
improve
that.
the CRS.
Dan, you need to opine here. You got to back one up here. You got to either go behind Mikal. No, seriously, because we can argue till tomorrow. We're not gonna get anywhere, right? No. Let's break it down and let's talk about this. Because Mikal, what you said is, why are you comparing it to the CRS? You're changing the question. Sure, we can have another roundtable, talk about how we can improve the CRS system. But that's not our question. We're saying, let the CRS be what it has been for the past and let it be as it is. What we're arguing is, let's do a caveat, right? Reduce 50,000, give me the 50,000, and out of the 50,000, I will recommend you pick 20,000 passive investors and you pick 20,000 active entrepreneurs and then probably 10,000.
So I don't know. I'll just say one last thing, and I'm going to try. I'm going to be quiet, and Dan's going to take over. But if you haven't looked at it, I encourage you to look at this paper we have, where we've got every graduate of the University of Waterloo since 2005, and we looked at their outcomes. So we've got that linked up. We've got all their grades. We know what program they graduated from, and we have their T1 income tax returns, and we have all their immigration records. Every graduate of Waterloo since 2005. The international students are outperforming the Canadian-born students at Waterloo. Every student. We have over 95.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about colleges, though?
No, just wait. So their earnings are off the charts. Like, go look at the data on how high the earnings of computer science graduates, international students, are at the University of Waterloo. We're shutting the door on those people right now in the current system. Those people are being shut out.
Sure, but then you're changing the question. I know. I'm a Mikal.
Why in the world you want to shut the door and prioritize passive? I don't even know what that is or how you measure.
No. Okay, let's go to Dan. But this is a good thing, and I have one thing to add. I'm not saying let's compromise the Waterloo student or the U of T student, right? I'm saying let's take 50,000 from express entry. That's a different story.
Compromising them.
No, we're not compromising them.
Yeah, absolutely.
How are we compromising?
That's 50,000 fewer computer science grads from the top universities across the country.
Well, that forced the policymaker to fix the CRS system to prioritize the Waterloo graduate over the college graduate.
That I agree with. That I agree. That's the margin on which you can make a difference.
There you go. We have an agreement with Mikal. Dan, what is your thought? Passive investor. Let's go passive investor. What do you think?
My first point is Canada's efforts at this have failed. So we haven't got a history that suggests that this is going to be successful in the future. So my next point is, as you said, there's dozens of countries around the world that have passive investor programs. Find some that do it right and actually measure the outputs. Now, what would I be looking for? What I would be looking for is, are they actually investing in that country? If they're worth $20 million, that's a figure you used. Are they actually taking that $20 million and putting it into that new destination country they go to? That's the first question. Second question, when they do that, are those investments successful? Are they actually doing something useful to the economies that they're going to? And if you can find somewhere in the world where there's a passive investor program that satisfies those two things, brings in lots of money, that is productive and actually propels economic growth in the economy, I would be convinced. So far, I've never found that.
Perfect.
So Canada's tried it, hasn't worked. I want to know, has anybody done it right? Now, you said that you wanted to bring in 20,000 passive investors, 20,000 entrepreneurs. So let's ask about the entrepreneur question. So have we done a good job on entrepreneur programs in Canada in the past? Not really.
Terrible.
The bulk entrepreneur program had all kinds of failures associated with it. Then we created the startup visa program in 2015. Great thing about that program is not last year now, it's late 2023. So a year and a half ago, IRCC did a really quite useful evaluation of the startup visa program. And they did exactly what Mikal was suggesting earlier on. They went to that seed database and they asked the question, like, how much money are these folks making? And so they did a roll up of 3 years of the folks who came in 2016, 17, 18, and they looked at their tax returns in 2019. And what they found was they concluded the program was successful, but it's a very modest level of success. This is not something that we should, have a ticker tape parade down Main Street about, right? The average, I just pulled some of the numbers, 42% created an incorporated business. Now that's better than zero, but it's not even close to 100%. Next thing, for those who did have business income, the median business earnings was 40,000. Now, compare that to the folks that we were just talking about that come through the federal skilled worker program. Their employment earnings are on average way more than 40,000. I know you're comparing apples and chalk and cheese, whatever, when you're talking about the employment earnings of the federal skilled workers versus the business earnings of the business class. But it hasn't been a raging success. It's not been a failure. It's not been a total failure, but it's not been a raging success either. Now, the question is, first of all, can you do better at the same time that you're doing way more, right? Because the
Yes,
startup
we
visa
can.
program is
We can definitely.
small potatoes by comparison to your 20,000 a year. What is it? 3,000 a year? I don't know, some number like that.
1,000,
So can
1,000, 2025, 1,000, 2026,
Yeah, that's right. I know, but
1,000.
last year it was a few
1,000.
thousand. Yeah, exactly. Can you multiply that by 20 and get better outcomes at the same time? I'm very skeptical.
Okay, let's unpack that. First of all, do you agree that just because nobody's doing what they should be doing, that we can't do what can be done? So that's our attitude here. Like, we're not comparing to what's happening. The best comparison is the EB5 program that the US has, passive investment program. It's a good program. A lot of abuse. A lot of money found its way to luxury real estate. Well, we can fix that. There's a model there, sophisticated, nice model that we can improve, implement a few strategic fixes, and US is taking 10,000. And Donald Trump quite proudly comes and starts the idea of a $5 million gold visa. So there are models that we can use, and then we can improve, and then we can implement. But more importantly, I think we haven't answered this question in this roundtable. How are we measuring success? Well, two things, Dan, you said, and I love both of them, but one is more important than the other. One is the investment coming, and is the investment placed, right? Okay, if I'm saying my passive investment program gives you a condition that you have to bring in 2 million Canadian dollar and invest it, that's one measure of success. Investment placed, tick. And then we can go and look at the return on that investment. Because if we give investors options, right, based on what we think as a country that is good to channel that investment, we can channel it to green energy, we can channel it to oil and gas. Let the political will of the day decide where the money goes. But why say no to money when we're facing an existential crisis? So metric number one, was the money invested? And then for program integrity, because here's the honest truth. One of the other criticism of the EB5 program, the investment money really went to the intermediaries, to bad actor lawyers, to bad actor investors, right? They just got the money, they enriched themselves, the investor ended up with nothing but a green card. We can be better than that. We can place in metrics that measure the continuity of that investment and the return on that investment. And Mikal, we're not going to compare that return to global investment. We're comparing that return on investment with the Canadian context. So if I'm a prospective immigrant investor and I come here and I give you $2 million to your VC, at the end of the day, government should track your return with Dan's return with his building business to see which one of you generated a better return. So we give you reward. We give you more cap to get more investment. Does this make sense?
No.
And why not?
Well, I mean, your first metric, I don't understand why that's something we care about.
Because we don't have money. Because we don't have money in the country.
Investment is, if you invest in capital in the Canadian economy, the supply of capital is not perfectly elastic, which means when you increase the demand for capital, whether it's housing or machinery or equipment or factories or land to build factories, you drive up the price. So if it's completely unproductive capital, because people are just using, they don't care whether their return is, because they're just using this program to buy PR status. It's a gateway to PR status.
No, that's an assumption you're making. Let's be fair here. Your
I'm
criticism
telling
goes
you what
to
the
the
risk is.
how.
So
No, no,
why
okay,
do I
sure.
care? Let me finish. So why do I care? This kind of passive investment. Why do I care about the quantity of the investment itself when it just drives up prices potentially so that it crowds out other investment of Canadians that otherwise would have happened? It makes things worse. But you want to like give priority to people who do more of this bad thing?
No, 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 no. I didn't. But
That to me makes no sense.
no, but you're
Really, if
you're
you're going to
building.
do it, you want to look at the return on investment. You want to look at the return on investment, but that's not straightforward to do. That's far from straightforward to do. If the but potentially with enough lag, you can look at the experience. I'm just incredibly. I mean, capital. There are not big capital frictions around the world. That if these are really good businesses, people are maximizing the returns on their investment, and they're not thinking about value of PR status or a green card. That's the kind of investment you want, but you don't need to tie that to a PR status.
But that's a fundamentally wrong assumption based on the reality of the globe and the
No, it's
RBI
not.
market. Well, we could argue that. I
And
would love to argue this
no,
with you till tomorrow. I
no,
would love it.
it's
I would love it. But that's a fundamentally wrong assumption that you're making. You're making an assumption that nobody cares about immigration privilege and it's all about investment. I'm saying that is a
saying they do
fundamental.
care. I'm saying
You're saying,
exactly they do care. They
okay,
pay
so
for it. That's
then
exactly
what?
what I am saying. You attract by tying PR status to the investment dollar. You attract passive low return investments that just drive up prices of capital in Canada and crowd out other investment. Why?
Low return is an assumption, and not controlling where the investment goes is another assumption that you are basing your criticism on. You are
It's not an
assuming.
assumption. Dan's just told you the evidence. Weren't you listening?
We are talking the
You
our
have the evidence
mission.
on what it
No,
does.
Mikal, we are here to reimagine things. I'm not here to be trapped by what has been done before me. I'm
Yeah,
here to
it's
offer a way forward, sir.
there's no evidence that this works.
Okay,
Evidence
sure.
says it doesn't work.
God
Forget
willing,
Sorry to
we
interrupt,
will
but I'm going to
create a
have to be
program.
leaving soon, just so you know.
Okay, can we just talk about now? Let's go back to the entrepreneur one then. Let's go back to passive investment. Let's agree to disagree. Entrepreneurship, the startup visa. Is it a good thing to have? I'm going to give you a rundown of the startup visa, like a refresher in case you don't know. I know Dan knows, but Mikal, do you know how the startup visa program works, or can I give you a summary?
Sure, you can give me a summary.
Okay, so the startup visa program in design, it works like this. We want innovative, high potential businesses to come to Canada. And if you're a business and you have up to five co-founders in one business, all of you can be eligible for PR if and only if you have these four things. Qualifying business, which is just share structure of how the shares should be distributed among the co-founders. Settlement funds, modest 20-something thousand based on family member. Language, CLB. And then the main ingredient is you gotta have an endorsement from a designated organization. So if a Canadian designated organization gives you a letter of support, then you qualify, then you can apply for permanent residency. That's the startup visa program on design. 50 countries, I don't know, 40, 50 countries are doing it in the world. Canada remains the only country that gives PR at the get-go. So we're not saying come here, test it, and then we give you a PR. We're saying if you have that letter of support, we're going to trust you. Here's your PR. What's happening in the market right now? Well, I can tell you horror stories, right? I'm a practicing lawyer every day. I'm seeing designated organization extorting people. They're saying, hey, if you don't pay me this much, I'm going to pull the letter of support. There's a VC that says, I have to invest $200,000 in your business, but hey, give me $300,000 backdoor. I invest your own money in your business and I give you a letter of support. And dirty stories, right? So here we are, because I believe in the potential that I'm seeing, at least from my clients, immigrant entrepreneurs, of what can they bring to this country. And if we redesign this program to make it work, to actually give them the context that they need to grow and prosper, we can have a shot. So that's the startup visa program. So I'm saying, let's fix the startup visa and increase its capacity. Here's another proposition. Let's go with Dan. What do you think about this?
I would really want to ask the question, how can you fix it? By the way, I was very impressed by your listing of the problems of the program. I agree. There's all kinds of integrity issues that need to be faced. But can you actually fix those integrity issues at an administrative cost that isn't ridiculous, right? And also at an application process that isn't so onerous that nobody will apply anymore. Because obviously you have to have far more vetting of all of the things you just discussed in order to make that program have legitimacy. Then secondly, can you do all that and have better outcomes? Because the outcomes that are coming so far with the startup visa program are not astounding. They're only okay. The average business started by a startup visa person that came in that 3-year period from 2016 to 2018. In 2019, the average amount of business taxes they paid, $13,000. That's not a huge injection of funds into the Canadian economy. So can we fix it, make it bigger, and have better outcomes all at the same time? And if you can figure out a way to do that, I'd be super impressed, but I'm not capable of imagining what that would look like.
Perfect. Dan, let's go to Mikal. Forget the how. We'll go back to the how, and I'll present what we have found in our 7 roundtables so far. The design. Are you disagreeing with this one as much as you disagreed with the passive investor, or are you happy with this?
No, I'm not happy with this at all.
Why are you not happy with this one?
Well, I mean, again, it's like, what are the measurables? How do you prioritize people? It's a zero-sum game. Every time I prioritize this type of person, I'm shutting the door on somebody else. How do I do that? How do I take somebody in a CRS and I have expected earnings? How do I weigh them against somebody with these entrepreneurial skills that are totally not measurable, that has somebody vouching for me? I mean, I have no idea. Listen, I'm going to make myself really unpopular. I'm very good at doing this, by the way, but I'm going to make myself really unpopular with your audience. Here's what I want to see. And I'm going to overstate this just to make the point. All economic class immigration goes through express entry. We improve the CRS calculator to use more X's, to have more sophistication using modern techniques on how we predict earnings. And that's it. The beauty of that system is, it's wonderful for migrants because, and one more thing, it's not static. It gets updated. The CRS points get updated. So as the economy adjusts, the points potentially change. It's not static. But the beauty of that is you can put the CRS calculator online so any migrant can go on there and figure out what their points are. And in a steady state, they know what the cutoff is every 2 weeks because we're not having special draws for French language or the flavors of the month aren't changing. It's always just the top of that pool get picked. It's totally predictable. It's transparent. There is no need for any immigration lawyers or consultants. That whole industry gets shut down overnight. Those jobs are gone. And that labor gets reallocated. All those smart immigration lawyers, they get reallocated to doing really productive things in the economy, like creating real
Okay.
value.
Like
That-
I'm a
that's the model
sure
I have in mind.
I'm a fan of criticism, but then again, your assumptions are all fundamentally flawed with all due respect, but it's okay. Like I understand a lot of the things that immigration lawyers and consultants are doing, they can be solved if we have better system. But to take out that role, let's not forget the ambassador of Canada is the consultant and the lawyer. Who do you think is going to talk to the prospective immigrants? See, if you take the life, if you take the person out of that number, you're an economist, and I appreciate this. You tend to see people as numbers. I tend to see them as humans, right? That human needs interaction. That human needs a lawyer who he or she can trust, right? Somebody who can lead them navigate this journey of a life that they don't know anything about. Let's go back to the source countries. Let's not, again, go to the mistake that people that are coming to this country in the masses are from the US who are very close culturally to us. No, they're coming from radically different cultural backgrounds. They need people. They need hand-holding. And that, to me, is the role of a perfect immigration lawyer, somebody who you can rely on, right? It may be funny to you, but it's okay. This is the whole point of having roundtables like this, so we can bring everything out in the open.
Yeah.
Again, I understand. It really depends of how you look at the role of a lawyer, but this is another discussion. I want to go back to Dan and let's spend some time on the how, because Mikal essentially is saying, why are you wasting your time? With business immigration, we can do a perfect job with a good CRS system that is just importing workers to this economy. And I beg to
Wrong.
agree. No, it is. So what? So what? How does an entrepreneur
The
successfully
U
navigate to,
Waterloo student is not the computer science. Lots of these guys, I wouldn't describe
well,
them.
you wait a second. If I'm a future entrepreneur and I don't have an entrepreneurial program, you want me to spend money on University of Waterloo to get an education just because it will enable me to become a PR, then I become an entrepreneur? Why are you abusing me like that? This is basically what you're saying. You're saying a University of Waterloo graduate is a very good entrepreneur. Of course they are. But if I want entrepreneurship, why do I have to redirect them through the institution? You are saying you should. You're saying we don't need an entrepreneurial program. CRS can do everything. So is your argument, let's forget about entrepreneurship? If that is the argument, sure, that's another thing. Or you are saying the kind of entrepreneurship that Canada is breeding right now, and let's not forget what's happening on the ground. In the last 20 years, we have less than 50% of entrepreneurs that we had 20 years ago. So reduction of 50%. Why? Canada is not entrepreneurial friendly, right? We have a succession tsunami. $1.3 trillion of businesses are changing hands. And go look at the Federation of Independent Businesses report. They're saying their number one concern is finding an eligible buyer. And then look at all your immigration programs. There is no program enabling you to buy a business. Dan just alluded to that. Ontario closed down his entrepreneur programs and our businesses are dying. Hey, who's going to take over this mom and pop little shop that is barely making some money? Maybe an immigrant from Syria who wants to be in Canada and who's willing to bring his or her resilience to take that shop and turn it around. So is your argument, forget about entrepreneurship? Or is your argument, let's redirect entrepreneurs and take them to indirect path?
I guess I'm struggling to understand what this romantic notion of an entrepreneur is. The reality is that Canada's SME environment is not very productive.
Of course not.
Yeah, so why do we want people? Why are we trying to create more of these low product?
So what? So you want Canada to be the offshoring place for U.S. companies?
No.
So if the SME market is not productive, if it's not doing well, you know what my solution is? Import entrepreneurs. Bring in entrepreneurs who will bring in money and do business.
What's an entrepreneur?
Entrepreneur is someone who does a business with good intention. Entrepreneur is someone who does a business with good intention.
It's a buzzword. I don't know.
I don't think so. I just offered you a definition. Criticize my definition. Is good intention doing business in a continuum. Entrepreneur is someone who fails fast. Entrepreneur is someone who doesn't retire after one failure. He just, he has that resilience. How do you think US is the US? On the back of simple workers or on the back of entrepreneurs? That's our argument.
Just quickly jump in. I know, Mikal, you've got lots to say, but I have to leave in 7 minutes. I'll quickly jump in. So I've been looking at the social psychology literature a little bit, and it turns out that they can actually predict to some degree, not high R squared. Again, Mikal, we're back to that problem, but they can predict entrepreneurial potential. However, it takes like a psychological test to do it. It's not the simple things we measure in our CRS or anything like our CRS. Those X's that you want to add to the equation, Mikal, they're not what these social psychologists are talking about. I listed some of the things that they're looking for: expressivity, motivation, need for power, aggressiveness, and assertiveness. Are we ever going to have a CRS that measures those things that are actually predictive of entrepreneurial success? I mean, are we going to embed some sort of, psych test? I just don't think so. So can we come up, like if you want to reimagine an SUV as a better vehicle to bring people in, you have to tell us what are the criteria going to be, and are they actually measurable, and would they make sense in the way the CRS works? And
sure, here, I'm going to give you a proposal. Right now. Here's what happened on the ground. All the abuse of the program, under the designated organizations, we had world-class incubators that were designated, but they did not use the SUV program. But then we had yesterday born organizations that date 500 applications a year. Policymaker came up with this idea. I'm like, okay, what do? I punish everybody. This is lazy policymaking. So they imposed a cap on all designated organizations. Here's a very, very tiny little fix that can fix this. Tie the cap of designated organizations to their performance as measured by very clear KPIs. What is KPI? What is an entrepreneur? Oh, here's an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is someone who gains traction by generating revenue. So we measure revenue. Is someone who does business continuously. So continuity is something we measure. KPIs like that. I can go on and on and on about the KPIs that are easy to measure, and we have all the data. And it's fun to say that last week I had Umit Kiziltan, who was the chief data officer of IRCC, and he just confirmed what you're saying. We don't have a data problem. We have everything. We have all the data that we want to measure, right? So it's a matter of bringing up the KPIs. And this is not like, this is not new science. We can measure entrepreneurship quite easily. Just revenue and continuity, those two things, measure them. And then based on that, give points to the designated organizations. The designated organizations that produced businesses that had higher KPIs should get better caps. So this is one easy, tiny how. What do you think about this, Dan?
In principle, I think it's not bad, but you're going to have a big time lag problem, right? So you want to move to this big bang you explained a little while ago of moving from 1,000 SUV per year to 20,000 and even 50,000 altogether in terms of the business immigration program. If you did that tomorrow, let's just say all the planets somehow aligned and you could do that, it will take you 4 to 5 years to evaluate the success of just the first year of that program, never mind further on. And what you would find, no doubt, was that some aspects of the program were successful and some aspects were not. It's going to take like a long time to make adjustments to make this thing actually work. So,
and here's another thing.
And here's very risky to do this.
I know. I understand. We're not naive about what we're offering here, but like we're proud Canadians and we think we're smart enough that we can create systems that work. So here's another example of how the system is failing right now. There is no feedback. If you're a startup applicant and your lawyer is abusing you,
the feedback is very insufficient.
And if your designated organization is abusing you, nobody's listening to you. You want to contact IRCC? You send a web form. You're in a limbo. Nobody even answers.
I got full agreement on that. The amount of feedback.
If IRCC interacted with Canadians the way it interacted with immigrants, we would have a revolution yesterday. That's how bad and how derogatory and how just terrible it is, how we're treating these humans. And look at the Startup Visa founder, waiting in line 5 years, getting abused by the designated organization, getting abused by the lawyer, by the consultant, and they can't even reach out to someone at IRCC. Hey, what do I do? So they just say, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. Here's more money, here's more money, here's more money. They come to Canada and they're like, oh my God, what is this? So there's something that we didn't even get to talk about, and that's PsyCap, psychological capital. Nobody cares about the psychological capital of the immigrants who are coming to this country. What the express entry system does to your psyche. Minister sleeps, wakes up tomorrow, and then writes something, and all of a sudden your score dropped, and your life is out in the open. So this is
a lot of sympathy with what you're speaking about, the feedback systems and the human interface. Both of those things are lacking quite a bit. I'm going to have to run, but
Dad,
I'll say I'm intrigued by your proposal, but at the same time, I see it as monumentally challenging to produce a bigger program that's better at the same time.
It makes the whole system look more like a lottery. It's, what you need is transparency and simplicity. I don't know why you want to create even more complexity, because that's what's contributing to what you just described, which I'm very sympathetic to. Immigrants don't need lotteries. They need predictability. They need to be able to go online and see what the chances of success are.
Dan, do you have any last words for us? And in particular, will you be open to helping our initiative? For example, one of the ways that I would expect your help is when we get to the report stage, because as I said, this is one roundtable out of many. We put something together and I will send it to you. Just take a minute, read it, and give me your opinion on it.
I'd be happy to read a proposal, like a report that sets out some proposals for how the system might change. I'll be a hard sell, though, because I'm quite skeptical that the cost of administering is going to be justified compared to the outcomes that are going to be achieved. So that will be my underlying philosophy. Look, I really have to run. Mikal, wonderful to see you as always. Let's keep talking at some point. And Siavash, enjoyable. Take care.
Thank you very, very much, Dan.
Bye.
Okay. Mikal.
Yes.
All right. All right. So do you have another 9 minutes? Okay. So what do you think? Dan, just do me a favor. When you log off, make sure that the browser stays open until you see that it says uploaded 100%.
I'm having trouble finding how to get out of this. Oh, there, leave.
You can,
Okay.
yeah, leave Studio and then just leave the browser open. Okay. So back here. I want to go back to what you said, clarity and predictability. That's what the immigrant wants. We can give them that with this business immigration program. It's absolutely no trouble giving them rules that first make sense and also clear and predictable. But I just want to go back to that issue that you have with this idea of having a program designed to attract a different kind of an immigrant. And by different kind, I mean not skilled worker, but entrepreneurs and investors.
They're not different. I mean, the express entry pool, everybody in there is different, right? What you're trying to do is you set an objective, and you need to singularly focus on that objective and cream skim the applicant pool to try and maximize that objective. So if I'm doing that, and now I open up a different program that starts prioritizing these other kinds of people, then by definition, why were these people not being selected in the current objective? Well, it must mean I'm trying to achieve a different objective now.
Not really. Let's go back to the objective.
Why
Okay.
would they?
Oh, hold on.
Don't understand,
Okay,
right? Like,
objective.
you're just creating more complexity. And I'll tell you the truth. The part that worries me, I'll be totally transparent. The part that always worries me is that all these programs and different pathways that we have now, the system is a complete mess. Why has it become such a mess with so many different pathways? 2 words: private interests. It's just private interest lobbying IRCC for programs that meet their own needs. And I worry that this proposal you have is, again, the immigration law community. I imagine the fees that they can charge somebody who's going down this type of a program are much higher than the fees they can charge an applicant who can go online themselves and has no need for any consulting, right? They can see what their
Sure, but that's a
CRF is.
different. Okay, let's
That's fine.
zoom
It's
out.
private interests again.
Make out. Oh, I understand, and that's why we're having this out in the open, right? Like I'm saying, here's the thing. If you want to go in the market and pay a lawyer a hefty retainer, but if a lawyer is good and is giving you value, hey, God bless capitalism. But as long as they're giving you good value, but if you're going to a lawyer that are charging you just because they know how to trick the system so you get PR, shame on the lawyer and shame on the system. So we're not arguing that, right? That's just the obvious. But let's go back to what's the issue. Objective. GDP per capita. GDP per capita. Do you agree? Based on what you said, well, no, you do agree because you wrote it in your paper. GDP per capita wants capital, human skills, innovation. And innovation, you wrote in your most recent paper, is a byproduct of economic activity, i.e. entrepreneurship, which I totally agree. Innovation is not something that we can measure. Innovation is something that comes out of economic activity. So basically, GDP per capita wants human skills, capital, and entrepreneurship. Capital and entrepreneurship are entirely missing, Mikal, from the express entry system. The express entry, what do you mean? How are we measure? How are we?
Barriers to movement of capital. That's the idea.
No, but how do you measure? Okay,
Tie
no.
capital to PR. Right? I understand entrepreneurial skills. I understand that. But if somebody is really a successful entrepreneur, then surely at some point it shows up in their income.
Wait. You're saying capital is reflected in express entry. It is not. How do you say it is? Because in express entry, the only thing that I want you as the prospective express entry applicant to show me is settlement funds. How do I know if you're a millionaire, if you only have $20,000 in your bank account that is just good enough for your settlement funds? How do you say that capital is captured by express entry?
It's not, you're totally misunderstanding me. I think maybe it's fundamentally because there's an issue around like understanding the model of
Okay,
economic
so
growth.
let's
This
talk
whole
about, yeah,
model. Yeah,
okay.
I mean, the whole idea is that the capital flows, there aren't barriers. The assumption here is there aren't barriers, what we call frictions, in the capital market, so that it doesn't have struggle to get across the border. So if there's an
Sure.
investment opportunity and there's human, what you need is to do is combine human capital and physical capital. Think of it like that.
Exactly. That is exactly how I'm
And
thinking
so
about that.
human capital doesn't move easily across borders.
No, but then
When you
again,
have when you have an express entry or an immigration system, you want to ensure that you're prioritizing those people with human capital so that you have the human capital within the country. But the physical capital moves. You don't need to tie the physical capital to your immigration
but
system.
do you agree that physical
Capital is
capital,
the job of the immigration system.
sure, but do you agree that physical capital is the factor contributing to GDP per capita? Physical capital.
Absolutely.
Okay. Is it
Why do you that's not
thing?
the job of the immigration system to affect
Why
that?
not? Why not? If
I
US
just
is
told
doing
you
it,
why. Because it doesn't, there's
no,
free
no, you
capital
didn't. No, 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 no.
mobility.
Hold on.
There's free
You said
capital mobility.
even if I assume that there is free capital mobility, let's assume there's no friction.
There is.
Sure. Okay, there is no friction for movement of capital. Let's agree. We can operate on that assumption, right? There is no friction in the movement of capital. Now, I have a pool that I can select from. Do I go select the person who has more capital that can move the capital in the frictionless world, or do I go and select the person who doesn't have capital to move in that frictionless world? Does that make sense?
Why do you, when you're selecting immigrants,
Yeah.
you shouldn't be paying any attention to the capital investment
Why
side
not?
because
Why
that has
not?
nothing to do with immigration. I've just explained why.
No, because you didn't explain. This goes to your vision about immigration. What's your vision of immigration? You never explained that. If you are saying physical capital is not a good indication of selecting immigration, and that's not immigration, is what
You're
I'm,
not
I'm
you're not listening or not understanding. Look, the whole point, I don't know what part of this you don't understand. If there are no frictions, capital frictions, and capital can just move wherever around the world, then it should be kind of obvious that clearly it doesn't matter where the person who owns the capital lives to where they invest it. Then clearly it shouldn't be something that you take into consideration when
yeah.
you have immigration.
No, I understand. I think no, we exhausted this.
But human
No. I get
capital,
it. No. I get it.
so
I
then
get
you
what you're coming from.
prioritize human capital when you select. That's the singular focus, is to prioritize the human capital of candidates. Yeah.
Sure. But then again, I'm worried about the time that we have. So, Mikal, thank you very much. This was a very engaging conversation, and
Yes.
I enjoyed grappling with it. And I look forward to do this more with you.
Yeah.
I encourage you to follow the
Do you guys
roundtables.
ever have any data on the fees that you're charging clients? I would love to see that. So the fees that different clients get charged, depending on kind of their characteristics and the kinds of programs they're applying under,
Yeah,
I would love to see that. I think that would be very informative.
sure, but that goes to how of a program and the role of the intermediaries in that program.
Well,
We
it goes
still
to
have to,
getting private interests and what motivates people
yeah.
and, why they advocate for one
Sure.
type of program versus another.
No, absolutely. Let's be
Yeah.
absolutely clear. Like here, we're not saying that with a good business immigration program, it's not going to be good business for business immigration lawyers. The reason why we're doing this so out in the open and so unapologetically, it's because we think that the country's interest is very much in line with the prospective business immigrant and the interest of the
What if
prospective
the
business immigration
what if
lawyer.
the economists disagree with that?
Well, you're one economist. We're gonna see more. Of course. No, it's okay. It's okay. Like we're not scared of. Like, listen,
You're just going to
we're not.
ignore what the economists are saying then.
No. We're not. We
Yeah.
with ideas because these are clashes of ideas, right? And I love to having them. And I
It's
think
evidence. It's more than ideas. It's evidence that we're talking about.
it's your take on the evidence, more precisely
So
put
now
it,
you're in a
because
world, there's no facts, there's no truth.
There is truth and there
Yeah.
are
What I'm
facts.
trying to
But we
describe
did.
to you is the truth. Yeah.
This is amazing. We got to do another one, but we're going to have more economists on the roundtables. We're going to keep on talking about this, and we think this is the obvious thing that Canada needs in a world that everybody's doing it, but it's okay. Again, I'm happy to have disagreements, and I
Yeah.
think
It
out of
sounds like
disagreement,
polemics. I got to admit, this was not a good. If I'd known what this was before I went into it, I wouldn't have done it because it's polemics. I don't know if you know what polemics are, but that's what
no,
this is.
no. It's
You've got an agenda, and you're just looking for people that are going to agree with that.
but well, thank God for you. You
Yeah.
disagreed with, right? So no, this is
I think
we
this
do have.
is exactly a big part of the problem with Canadian immigration is this is the way
No. We do
and then they just blow ahead and they don't look at
No. We do have an agenda. That agenda is for the country, and we welcome disagreements. We're not scared of disagreements. And as I said, I'm sorry to hear that if you knew what this was, you wouldn't have participated.
yeah,
But
I didn't
then
know
again,
I didn't
well,
know there was agenda. I thought it was an honest discussion about what it
well, now that you're getting into something else, how do you think this conversation was dishonest?
No, I didn't
Because
say it was
this is,
honest.
well, you are saying you expected an honest conversation, you didn't get it, and I'm particularly interested.
So,
Why do you think this
yeah, so
conversation was dishonest?
there's agenda. Next time you give an invitation, I would be clear what the agenda you guys have an agenda. And you're
Yes,
looking to
but how
advance
is
the agenda.
that agenda dishonest? Agenda is introduce business immigration to the country. It's good for the country.
So I'll tell
You
you
are
why it's
saying
dishonest.
don't think it's good for the country. It's okay. Why are you accusing us of dishonesty,
I'll
Mikal?
tell you why. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
the world I come from,
Mm-hmm.
the hours of work I spend are singularly focused on truth seeking.
Okay.
What's the truth? So I have on my website, I'll send it to you. You can find it on my website, a disclosure statement where I very clearly state I will not participate in any organization with private interests. I've never taken 1 cent of money from any organization or been involved with any organization with private interests. I think that's a huge part of the problem we have with our immigration system. And the only thing I've got from this conversation is that you guys are not seeking truth, you're advancing an agenda. And that's what I mean by honesty. That wasn't clear when I participated in this. Now, it's
Then
not a big
again,
deal. Not a
it
big
is
deal.
a big deal. I'm sorry to say, but it is
I
a.
would have liked a little bit of advance warning because I can assure you,
I
I
think
would have
it is.
participated in this.
I beg to disagree, and I think it is a very big deal, and that was a heavy accusation.
Yeah.
And I remain to say we have an agenda. We're not scared of the agenda. We
Yeah,
know
so
what it is.
I don't get involved with people with agendas. So I wish I'd known that before.
But it wasn't the invitation. The invitation clearly said, look, this is a proposition. I think you should have read that email more carefully then.
Maybe.
Because if you,
Maybe.
yes, because if you go to that email, it's out there, Mikal.
Okay. Then I
So
misunderstood.
no, this was not dishonest conversation. This was anything but honest. So
Okay.
yes. And well, I thank you for your time nonetheless.
Okay, same.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Enjoy the rest
Have
of
a
your
good
day.
weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.